another episode for you this week. Please like, share, subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and I hope that you enjoy this week's conversation. This episode will consist of topics around domestic abuse, domestic violence and sexual violence. If you require any support or help, please get in contact with your local domestic abuse, sexual violence organisation. In the UK, you can call the National Domestic Helpline on 0808 2000 247. And if you are listening overseas, please contact your national helpline where support, advice and guidance will be available for you. Hello and welcome to another episode of A Conversation with the amazing Claire. This episode, we continue from where that episode ended. Welcome back to another episode in A Conversation with, and we're still continuing with Claire Throssell, who's been on a bit of a journey over the last few months, which is why there's been a bit of a delay in recording, because she's been a busy woman, and which has been amazing. It's been amazing to see in that time. She's launched a book, she's had some very important conversations with some very important people, and using her skills as activism to continue to make significant changes within the law around domestic abuse and making sure that another victim or survivor or child never goes through what she and her family have had to experience. Welcome back, Claire, to this episode. And I know that we've got a lot to talk about, but let's start with how you've been doing.
Oh, it's been whirlwind for the last 3 months. In October, I finally launched my book, which is a loving and lasting testimony to the boys, and it's called For My Boys, and it details all the struggles of the last 10 years, what happened before that, and on top of that, we've spoken to the Prime Minister, and he's finally made a promise that he will repeal presumption of contact, which is just amazing. And the fact that he announced it on the 11th anniversary of the boys was so bittersweet, and it was a complete 360 from the government of the day in 2014 trying to make Jack and Paul anonymous letters on a serious case review to gather dust in a file in Whitehall to wanting to announce this on the boys' anniversary and recognising them and actually calling it in their name. This law will be Jack and Paul's law. And it was just incredible, and it doesn't feel like a victory, because how can it? We're talking about children's lives, but it's the big step forward and the first government, sixth government, to finally do the right thing, not the easy thing, and remove presumption of contact.
And that is significant in itself. Obviously, there's still hurdles to go, but the fact that we are now having those conversations, and quite serious conversations, which is likely to be implemented, we just need dates. And obviously, we're going to be talking about that in later episodes about calls to action and stuff, and not just saying things for the sake of saying things. Actually, let's do, and where's the action? So that we will pick that up. But just to acknowledge how that has not been easy for you, and that has been a fight pretty much since the day that your boys sadly passed away, that you have fought, and I'm, as a grieving mother, using that grief to fight and to be your driving force to 11 years later get into this point. And yes, it's taken 11 years, and yes, there's lots of blood and tears and all sorts of things that you have shed over those, but we are finally there. It's a couple more hurdles to go, but you're finally there.
Yeah, and I will definitely still have the foot on the gas for the next few months to make sure that the bill goes through and it gets passed, and presumption is finally repealed, because presumption has no place in law, never has, it never will. And the fact that it was introduced just months before I accessed the court system and it resulted in the boys losing their lives is just painful beyond belief.
Talk about this week, and actually you've just said it is about your experiences of court. The last episode we spoke about that you had left, that agencies weren't really helping you, that you was still continuing to fight even after leaving, after having those really horrendous experiences. You're still having to fight, but you haven't even processed the trauma of this relationship. You are going on autopilot. And so what we want to do over the next couple of episodes is talk about court, in particular family court, in your scenario. And so what I think it'd be really good is, because there will be many people that are listening to this that have children, there will be many people that will wake up one day with a brown envelope on the door and they've been served court papers, or they've got court dates or whatever. And that could be for a non-molestation order where the perpetrator is trying to get one, or it could be a child arrangement order that's coming through your door. And so from your perspective as a survivor, your lived experience of this, I thought it would be really useful to explore those feelings and that emotion and where you go in your brain. And one, to obviously talk about your experiences, but also to talk to other people that this is a universal feeling. Does that make sense?
It does. I think going right back to 2014, it took a breakdown at school by Paul, an emotional breakdown, and the fact that school rang me and said, can you come and pick up Paul from school? We know it's day to pick the children up, but we don't feel safe. For a school to say this, we don't feel safe handing Paul over to his dad. But because there was no legal proceedings in place at that point, I had to go and collect him because the school couldn't have stopped him from picking Paul up. So right at the beginning, I was already shielding and deflecting when I was already feeling on edge. I was beaten down. I was feeling humiliated and like a piece of dirt underneath the whole world's shoe. Now I'm in a situation of having to deflect everything and protect at the same time. So I had to cause trouble at work because somebody had to cover my job. I had to leave. I had to pick up Jack from his school, and then I had to pick up Paul from his school. Paul was distraught, so I had to immediately, all I could think of was giving him a big hug, just pulling him in and giving him a big hug. And he was stood there sobbing in my arms, and he just had enough. He couldn't process anymore. He was so scared and traumatized. And I just literally picked him up in my arms, kept him in my arms. Jack was with me because I took him into school with me. And I said, let's go home. But immediately I had to ring him, take that phone call and say to him, you can't see the boys tonight and I've picked them up from school. What have you done to him? It's your fault. Those were the first words. And I went, hang on a minute. I've been contacted by school. This looks bad on you, not me. But when you've took the blame for so many years, to get that strength to turn around and say, hang on a minute, this is on you, mate. Which was the first time I'd done that for years and years. And it was that cub and lioness moment. Paul was in bits still, sat on the chair. I had to deal with him, make sure they couldn't hear the conversation. And I had to scaffold and build him back up. But there was nobody there to scaffold and build me back up. So we had this conversation, and I knew that immediately I'd have to take it further. Social services rang me because obviously school made the referral. And they said to me, off the record, no contact. Off the record is no good to me. That is not legal, that is not lawful, and that does not stop the father with parental rights just turning up and taking him from...
This audio was created with async.com.
The father with parental rights just turning up and taking him from school. So I began the process. My solicitor, who I had a consultation with, said, okay, we need to go for an emergency residency order. I'd never heard of this in my life. And the way, this is really important, because the way that they talk, they don't put it in simple terms. The solicitors use the legal terms of their practice. And to me, that meant nothing. A residency order, an emergency residency order? What does that mean? And I actually said, wait a minute, what does this mean? And she explained that this would make me the main carer and the boys would reside with me. Now, I knew that he was capable of killing the boys because I'd lived with him and he saw the boys as a possession. He was jealous, so jealous of anybody else that spent more time with the children than him. But he wasn't good with them when he had them. He either shouted at them, disciplined them unnecessarily, or was spiteful to them. I didn't say it hysterically, but I did reiterate several times, he will kill them. And she was giving me the evidence. Okay, a man and 2 children on the news that he'd murdered the children. He's completely separate in his rages. He's got no filter, no control, and he's hurt all 3 of us before. All 3 of us had scars on one of our arms that he'd caused.
So just to interject, right at the beginning, you said about the school calling you up. And I think that's really important, is that both parents, until like legal changes, both parents have got the same parental rights.
Yeah.
And so the school do not have the power to stop one parent from picking up a child from school. All they can do in that scenario is, if they've got safeguarding concerns, is what I call delay tactics, by calling the safe parent, in your case you, to be able to get there quicker. So schools can do that if they are aware of the situation. So if you are listening and you are worried, you can speak to your safeguarding officers within the school, and they can put a little bit of a plan together that if the kids are distressed or if it's contact days, they can do some delay tactics. In this case, exactly what happened to Claire. So if you want, as a parent, to be able to limit that or to stop, then you are going to have to consider going to court.
And getting a court
order. So my question to you, Claire, is, obviously you've been in this marriage, you know what this man is capable of. How quick, within timescales, days, weeks, was it that you made the decision to leave, that you are then applying for court orders? That's my first. And then my second question is, had you ever gone to court ever before in your life?
It was literally a month from leaving to having to do the emergency court application because Paul couldn't cope with it. Paul was terrified. Paul was traumatized. It was Paul that had the most abuse thrown at him. And whilst I was in the home, like you say, you risk manage, and I could look after the children. Now they were there on their own and had to risk manage themselves, and at 9 and 12 that's impossible to do. And Paul just could not cope with that. He couldn't regulate. He was traumatized. He was scared, and I had to do something whilst I was still traumatized and scared. I'd never been to a court. I'd never been in trouble with the police. I'd never had any visits. I had no idea what was in store. In my head, it was like watching the TV program, The Old Bailey, or Cabinet QC. That's what I was thinking in my head. So to be faced with just a boardroom inside a court building, just sat 4 seats away from my abuser, it was a hell of a shock.
Mm.
The judge was just in normal clothes. She'd not even dressed smartly. She'd just got trousers and a top on. She was just a little bit further up than I was in this room. But the build-up to the court appearance itself was just horrendous, because I've talked about the post-separation abuse. That ramped up 100%, because now he couldn't see the children.
Mhm.
Now the emotional abuse was coming to me via texts saying, if I can't have the boys anymore, I'm going to end my life. You've broken my heart's in pieces. I can't see the boys anymore. Look what you've done. And this narrative, look what you've done, was still continuing. All this now was my fault. He wasn't ashamed that if it had been me and I thought I'd caused my son to have a breakdown like that, I would have been absolutely devastated. I would have felt so terrible and bad that I'd caused my child to feel like that. He felt none of that. All he could see was, you've taken away my toys and I'm going to chuck my teddy out the pram and I'm not going to play ball anymore.
And I think that's really important, because we see that so many times where the perpetrator is not interested in the children, like they've not been there for those like important milestones. The children are a nuisance. But then when the survivor leaves, all of a sudden there is this demand about contact, and that you're stopping me from seeing my kids, you're doing this, you're doing that, which for me is just evidence that this is never and was never about the children. It is very much about how I can hurt or continue to hurt my survivor, my victim. And if your mother is going to get you to respond, it's your children. Mama bear mode. The mother's stopping me from doing this, that, the other. Court may go in their favour. And then all of a sudden, that perpetrator is then stopping all contact with mum. It's crazy how the system can actually topsy-turvy on itself.
And all too often the courts listen to the loudest voice, and the loudest voice is always the perpetrator.
So you've made this application, you've had this meeting with your solicitor is using all of the legal jargon, and you're like, what the hell is this? This doesn't make any sense. And also, let's be real, it's costing you an absolute fortune for a solicitor to tell you things that you don't understand or know. So you're having these conversations, you are working out your options, you left the solicitors, and then all of those feelings and your next steps.
So I walked out of the solicitor's office and I was shell-shocked. I was told that he was going to have the papers served on him personally. That meant, and I didn't know that. I said, what does that mean? And she looked at me as if I was backward or something. And she said, it means one of our employees goes out in a car and serves the papers by hand. Okay. But then the effect of that was he went straight back on the attack and got his own solicitor. And then letters started coming through my door. How he went for my mental health. How he went for I didn't cook healthy food for the children, that I was alienating the children. He wasn't seeing the children, he wanted to see them.
I understand. I do get it, because obviously solicitors are paid and they get paid a lot of money, and to them it doesn't matter if that person is correct or wrong in theirs, that they've got that's their job. But the aggressive nature of the perpetrator's solicitor within those letters, I've personally read letters written by solicitors for the perpetrator that have been so aggressive, so abusive in nature, that actually it takes into no consideration the element of actually there could be some truth into what this person has done. And it's that continuation of the abuse as part of that post-separation abuse, because now you've got another person that's almost been recruited to continue. Was that your experience?
And it's a secondary abuser, let's face it. The court, solicitors, they're secondary abusers. And I'm reading all these lies. And my mum used to say, just calm down, You knew this was going to come. Whether you know it's going to come or not, it's still a hammer blow to the chest. And you start to dread the postman. You start to dread what's coming through the door. You get to a point where you can't even bring yourself to open the letters because you know what they're going to contain. And in amongst that, you've got 2 children that's absolutely terrified that they're going to have to see the dad again. I never promised Jack and Paul that they wouldn't have to see the dad. I never made promises that I couldn't keep. And I wish now that I'd taken that fear away, because all you want to do as a parent is take all the worries away. But I didn't realise they were worried about me, and they thought in their own minds that I was in trouble.
This audio was created with async.com.
They thought in their own minds that I was in trouble. And when they knew I was going to go to court, they were saying to me, "But Mummy, you are coming home, aren't you? You're not going to be locked up." And I'm like, "I'm not going to be locked up, boys."
Quite frankly, and we're not going to shy away from difficult language, disclaimer, I might swear, but like, you're also having to, like, you're shitting a brick as well. Do you know what I mean? Is actually, I have no idea what this is going to be like. I have no idea what's going to happen in court. So you've got also that unknown fear, as well as trying to reassure your boys, as well as trying to reassure your own brain.
It was the big unknown. And it's more scary, isn't it, if you don't know something? The big unknown is more scary than known.
And I say that to victims all the time, is that like where they say, "Oh, I've just been served like court papers for a child arrangement order." And it is that fear, because actually when you say court, you do have these images in your mind of what court could look like because of your TV shows. And fear is a good motivator not to do something, to back off. And that is an element of what the perpetrator wants. They want you to back off. They want you to not speak. They want you to be silenced. That is very much a tactic that a perpetrator does use, because court is scary. What does that mean? I'm going to have strangers looking at me. And we don't hear particularly very good stories about court, for absolute genuine reasons why you don't hear good things about court.
Yeah, and with it being an emergency hearing, there was literally a fortnight between serving the papers and going into court. There was no time for Kafkas to be involved, so the solicitor said to me, "Everything's going to be," what's the word I'm looking for? The other way around. Normally, you speak to Kafkas before you go into court. You'll have an officer assigned to you, and they'll be there in the court. This time, because it was an emergency hearing, everybody was scrambled to attend. No meetings could be done. So the very first time I saw the Kafkas officer was in the court. But the night before court was awful. The boys were absolutely clinging to me, terrified. "Please don't make me see my dad." And that was out of my hands. And I could not say to them, "I can't promise that. I cannot make sure that you never see him again, because you might have to see him again." And I'm trying to prepare them, saying, "You'll be fine. It's going to be okay." But they were worried. And on the morning when I was going to court, they were both distraught. So I took them to school upset, absolutely clinging on to me, saying, "You are coming home tonight, aren't you, Mummy? You are coming home. You are going to pick me up from school." And I said, "Yes, I'm going to be here. Yes, I'm picking you up from school." And nothing I said would make them feel better. Nothing I said could make them feel safe and secure that morning. Their grounding, everything that kept them safe and regulated, had gone that morning. And I had to deal with that. And I felt so guilty that they were so upset and distraught and scared, and I couldn't say to them, "It's going to be okay." I couldn't put that sticking plaster on the knee. I couldn't wipe away their tears and stop those tears from coming. because I couldn't say anything that could do that. And I was feeling on edge myself. I thought, what do I wear? What do I look like? And I thought, I'm just going to be me. I'm just going to dress smart and I'm just going to be me.
You said something about you're spending time working out what to wear. Do you know what I mean? Like, because actually this is real stuff that we have to think about, because if we wear a top too low, then are we considered to be something else? If we wear too much makeup, are we like there's all these expectations on us as women, but also as mothers, and if we've never been into a court. So it sounds like really insignificant about you working out what to wear, but actually it becomes quite a significant question mark, doesn't it?
It does, because like I say, he turned up in his suit looking all professional, and it's not really. And I still had in my head, there's going to be gowns, there's going to be wigs, there's going to be a formal atmosphere. So what do you wear to a court? I've committed no crime other than trying to protect my children. And what image do I want to come across? I thought normal clothes wouldn't look right. So I went for smart, not formal. But I had no idea what to wear, and the solicitor just laughed when I said, do I look all right? And it was like, you look fine. But for me, it wasn't looking fine. And when you've been criticised for years and years about your appearance, what you're wearing, and you've been told what to wear, and he actually drove me back to a shop once to change a dress that I'd bought because he didn't like it. All this comes into play, and all this harm, this physical and emotional harm, stays with you. It's still just 2 months after leaving. I'm still in that bubble of what would he want me to wear? What would he expect me to wear? And getting out of that mindset takes a lot. You're still in that bubble. You're still in that fight or flight mode. And you're just lost, because I had no idea what was coming that day. So I thought, I'll wear smart and hope for the best. I was told to go to the solicitors and then we would walk to the court together. And at the solicitors, there was no reassurance. I arrived in tears and there was no tissues. It was just, right, man up, we're going to court. No cup of tea. No, 5 minutes. So I got all this emotion from taking the boys to school, all this worry and all this fear, and I just carried it with me into the courtroom, and that continued. We got to the court, and as I was going through the door, there he was, sat there, and he had a thing of tapping his foot on the floor. It's something I write about in my book a lot, because that was how I knew he was annoyed. That was how I knew that things were going to kick off. And he sat there and his foot was tapping on the floor. And I just went to pieces. I just saw that tapping and I thought, this is it. And we had to sit in the same waiting area. And I had to sit and watch this man tapping his foot, dressed in his suit, already cocky, thinking he was going to win. I had no idea what the courtroom was going to look like. And then we were called to a door and he just physically went for me outside this door. He said, are you happy now with what you've done? And went for me. My solicitor got in the way. His barrister said, you're really not helping yourself. But that's the whole point. He was beyond control. He couldn't help himself. Now he'd got nothing over me and I was trying to do what the boys wanted. Not what I wanted, what the boys wanted. He'd lost control. We went into the courtroom late because I had to be taken around the corner. He went into the courtroom and then I went in. And I was sat down literally just 4 chairs away from him. It was just literally a boardroom of tables. And I was like, this is a court? This is a courtroom? I looked up at the judge. There was no gown. There was no hat. There was nothing. She was just dressed as a normal civilian. And I'm like, That's the judge. And we were sat down, and my solicitor said, don't address the judge, I'll address the judge. And I had to sit and listen to people relating about my life, and I couldn't say anything. And I felt so useless and worthless, just sat there. And then he started hurling insults across the courtroom, hurling insults across the table, and the judge didn't stop him. She let it go on, and then when he started swearing, she did finally stop him and tell him to shut up, and the fact that you have a barrister there representing you. And he was, what do you expect me to do? I'm trying to conduct a case here, and you're just throwing insults in. But those insults landed. Those insults were just another layer on top of all the other insults that I carried in my chest. And it was just confirmation that I was worthless. I was that piece of dirt underneath the whole world's shoe. Who was I to try and keep the boy safe? Who was I to challenge this person? And my solicitor said, you're not going to get no contact at all. And I said, but he'll kill him. And that's all I could keep saying. He'll kill him. That wasn't enough for the judge. My voice and fears was minimised. And the court order was 5 hours unsupervised contact.
This audio was created with async.com.
And the court order was 5 hours unsupervised contact a week.
Did you only have one court case?
Yeah, we were due a final hearing, but he'd killed him by then. The hearing was scheduled, but we didn't even get there.
How soon after the order was granted, so he's got the 5 hours unsupervised, how many days or weeks passed before he done what he done?
3 months. And half of those visits I stopped because the boys just wouldn't go. And this is how much our fears were minimised. Jack's voice was never heard. His feelings, wishes never got expressed. Because Kafkas was out of the timescale and they didn't get involved till October, Paul saw the Kafkas officer and he told the Kafkas officer, my dad makes me eat peas until I'm sick. Jack never got to say, but I'm also sat at that table and I watch my brother being sick and I cry and I get called a crybaby by my dad. The response from the right back in the July when I said he would scare Paul and force Paul to eat foods that he didn't like. We'll do contact around mealtimes and no overnights. And they thought that was solving the problem.
So it was unsupervised contact. So no point was there any suggestion that for a week or a couple of weeks or month or whatever that it would be supervised. It went straight from you leaving this abusive relationship, you fleeing in fear, your children starting to process the trauma even though they haven't, and the judge in this particular case didn't consider supervised contact, went straight to unsupervised. Is that?
Yep, went straight to unsupervised, despite the fact I kept saying, he'll kill him. And that's all I could keep saying. Maybe I was in shock. Maybe I was, by then the trauma was coming out. And I just kept saying, he will kill them.
Did his solicitor, did the judge, did anyone reach out to you and go, we got this wrong, we're sorry?
Nope. There's been no apology. And she still sits on the bench in family court and she still gets things wrong. She still screws up people's lives.
Wow.
Kafka sent me a letter admitting they'd made mistakes, but then when they got away with it in the serious case review, they won't meet with me after that. There's been no formal apology from anyone. And I don't even know if that Kafkas officer is still working. But I know the judge is still on the bench. And yeah, no repercussions, no consequences at all.
On children, where there has been some suggestion of domestic abuse without any formal reports from school, CAFCAS, social worker, whoever, because a decision can be made of that magnitude. There is a serious allegation of domestic violence here. Regardless if it's true or not, there's a serious allegation. As a judge, you have a duty to make sure that you are 100% certain of a decision that you're going to be making. So it takes some due diligence, having some reports. And the fact that in this particular case, that actually not even a Section 7, which is normally, for those that don't understand or are about to go through family court, Section 7 is ordered by the judge to get more information. It's almost like a fact finding. So that's where the CAFCAS officer will speak to both parents, children, any caregiver, anyone involved in the children. That's what the process should be. And that's what the protocols in their policies state should be. And the fact that in this case, a judge made a decision, even though there is evidence on that day, in that morning, in that half hour, to suggest all is not well. And it was not like you've been attacked, for example, in a waiting room. That should have been brought up by a solicitor, where they did, because the solicitor is working for you. You're not working for the solicitor. The solicitor is your defense. And the fact that actually decisions were made. And I think that the reason why I'm saying that is that it's the only route in the UK that you can go down to be able to put an order in place to limit contact or PR, whatever. It's the only way so far in this country that we can do that. So it's preparing survivors for family court, because not all family court is the same, because all the judges are different. Their understanding of domestic abuse is different. Their decisions,
Personalities.
yeah, their decisions are different. And so you would think that magistrates, judges would have a basic understanding of coercive control, particularly post-separation abuse, even more, but they really don't.
No. And throughout those 3 months, I'd been battered down. I was totally emotionally gone. I was exhausted. I was looking after the boys and scaffolding and supporting them. I was deflecting all the anger. I was taking on all the responsibility for the children. He never paid a penny financially. And when my solicitor said that's £900 for an emergency court hearing, pay it today, it was like, wait, what? Nothing can prepare you for family court. Nothing can prepare you for going through that. You use all your energy and your strength and your courage to, and then you have to find more because you get post-separation abuse, and their anger against you and hatred builds and builds, and then you have to find something else on top of that to face them in a courtroom when you've done nothing wrong except try to build a better life for yourself and your children. Finally try and give them that safe future free of eggshells and oppression and the threat of harm. The whole system is a secondary abuser. The first abuser is your partner. The secondary abuser is the court, the system, and every other organisation involved when you're trying to leave. All the barriers that are in place. It wasn't just the court that I was facing. I went to the council and said to them that I needed to be put on the waiting list for a council house. Now that to me was a walk of shame. I'd had my own house, paid a mortgage. To have to ask for help from the council was, for me, going to the lowest point ever. And I was stood in a public area at a desk, and this council worker looked at me and said, "Why do you think you'll get a council house? You're on a mortgage. You've walked out and made yourself homeless. You're not going to go on the list."
Mm.
And I just stood there and cried
Mm.
from shame, humiliation, and the fact that they were saying I deliberately made myself homeless.
Mm.
And that I wasn't entitled to help because I was on a mortgage.
Mm.
So I'd done everything right. I'd worked hard. I'd paid a mortgage for 18 years, played by the rules. And now I was going to get punished with a huge stick for doing that.
And thankfully, there have been some changes. It doesn't help in your situation, but there has been some changes around the domestic abuse bill where there is much more emphasis on councils to provide safe accommodation. What that looks like, is questionable at times, but that is their duty. It's now written in law, which again, your situation, your story, Paul and Jack's story, could be part of the reason why the legislation was changed, like to be able to strengthen that. It's again, you're going to organizations for wanting help. Nobody walks into the council and says, "I'm homeless," especially when you have got a beautiful home that you've been living in with your boys. You've never been brought to the attention of services, so to speak. So even that itself should be an indicator, hey, somebody needs some help and support here. And even if they couldn't help you because of the law, the legislation around that, actually having some compassion around the delivery of that and going, "Hey, have you tried? Here's some options," or whatever. And I think that's really important.
This audio was created with async.com.
Or whatever. And I think that's really important for those that are listening, because even though the law has changed and it is strengthened to a certain degree, it's by no means perfect, is that actually it doesn't matter in terms of financial wealth that you have in your bank account, it's asset wealth. And that also affects legal aid as well. So it is important to, as a survivor, know what your options are before you go down a particular route, I guess, in terms of at least nothing can prepare you, as you said in your words about family court, but knowing, hey, on paper I've got this home that is worth this, so therefore I might not get the full allowance of legal aid, so how am I going to financially continue with this, etc. Just to have those kind of thoughts in your head and have a little bit of an action plan, because going through solicitors is not going to be cheap. It's not. It's 900 quid for a letter or whatever it is, or a hearing. It's £3,000 for this, and it's not a cheap option. It's not going to be easy when you're still fighting a fight, when you'll fight to the last breath in order to bring some form of protection around you and your kids in that situation.
Yeah, and solicitors can stop the court becoming a secondary abuser.
Yes.
With understanding, with training, they could have protected me more.
Yeah.
Just to have had a waiting area for myself without having to look at him. To have screens in the courtroom so that I wouldn't have had to see him 4 seats away from him. That is just ridiculous.
Yeah, that's not safe.
And yeah, you're scanned for weapons as you walk through the doors. But the biggest weapon is the face. The biggest weapon is the tongue. The biggest weapon is words. And he used all of those weapons in that courtroom. And in a magistrate's or a crown court, that won't be allowed. So why is it allowed in a civil court? And when we've not committed any crime, why do we have to go to court at all?
And you treated like you are the criminal, that you are doing something wrong. How dare you bring this order to protect your children? Now we're going to almost punish you. And actually, again, I have a lot to say about family court and criminal court, that I do not think that it's fit for purpose. It's definitely not fit for purpose for victims and their children. It is very much set up for perpetrators and criminals. The whole system, it is very much about their voice. And yes, there is, if we're talking down the criminal, the presumption of innocence. But even then, when you're bringing in, you didn't even have a say. Everything is going through your solicitor. So you couldn't clarify, you couldn't add context, you couldn't expand. And you're not allowed that opportunity to, yet you're the mother or you're the father. Do you know what I mean? You don't have the opportunity to explain your genuine concern.
I was silenced and I was invisible.
And then that's being relayed to a judge in a really factual, emotionless way.
And it led to 2 children being murdered. It led to two children's lives being taken because this court said he could. And all that action outside the courtroom door, there was no consequence for that. There was no consequence for him hurling insults across that table. There was no reckoning. There was no responsibility placed on him for his behaviour. And there was at no point did they say, you cannot do that in this room.
Is there a part of you that is still, I don't know if anger is the right word, because he never faced any justice. There was absolutely no accountability whatsoever for him. He didn't get arrested. He didn't go to court. There was no justice.
I found it really difficult to choose love over hate.
Yeah.
It would have been easy to hate the world, give up, give in, but then I'm no better than him. I find it really hard because the person I do want to scream at, the person is not here. And I have to be careful every single day not to put how I feel onto other people because it wasn't their fault. It takes far more emotion to be angry. It takes far more emotion to fester in hatred than it does to try and be positive and make changes and still see humanity and good in the world. There's never been any accountability, and the biggest thing I carry is guilt. The boys only died because of me. The boys only died because he wanted to punish me. And I have to live with that every day. And I take that responsibility. I take that on board and I carry it every day. But it's what I choose to do with that counts. There's only 2 guarantees. And one is that we're born and one is that we die. But it's what we do in the middle that counts. And I promised Jack that his final words would be heard. I promised Jack that his courage for trying to save his brother's life and for thinking about everybody else when he was dying apart from himself wouldn't be lost. And I can't go to where they sleep and hold my head up if I'm not trying. He knew what he was doing when he took his life, and I can't imagine what the emergency team felt like trying to keep him alive in hospital. They fought to keep him alive to see justice. They knew they were treating a murderer. They knew what he'd done, but they still fought to keep him alive to see justice. He's got away with it throughout the whole process. Even on the boys' death certificates, the coroner couldn't say they were murdered because of an ancient law that says if you can't stand trial for murder, you can't be called a murderer. Wow. So therefore, their death certificate says unlawfully killed and his says suicide. But that doesn't stop me from shouting the truth. That doesn't stop me from trying to stop these parents from doing it again and again. Because if an adult was at risk of being tortured or killed, then they're protected. So why aren't children?
Claire, I just want to say that you are an incredible woman, because I don't think I would have as much grace if it was me. The way that you use your grief, your pain, your guilt, all of it, to be able to continue giving a voice to your children is nothing short of remarkable. It's absolutely incredible how you use that. And the fact that we talk about Jack and Paul with the identity and with the names that they were given by you at birth, and we don't name the dad, because actually this is not about, or we're not going to give him any more power or acknowledgement other than his absolute criminality went above and beyond abnormal for a father that is supposed to love, care, and bring into the world. I think that you are absolutely incredible. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of saying it. I absolutely do, because there's not many. There are only very few mothers or women that use their pain to be able to use it as a driving force. There's lots of people that they crumble underneath that. And I'm sure that you could be many times where you could have crumbled, but you haven't. You found that grit, and there's something about you that is incredibly strong, and it hasn't broken you. So that is amazing. You do have a book. And so where can people buy your book?
So the book is called For My Boys, and it's available on Amazon. It's available in Waterstones and Asda.
Great. There will be a link to this where it will take you direct to where you can buy that book, and you can continue to support Claire in her fight to give voices to the voiceless, past, present, and future. Thank you for listening. Join us next time. Till then, take care of yourselves. And if you need any support or advice, please do contact the numbers that were given at the beginning of this episode.
This audio was created with async.com.